Welcome to the Conscious Classroom podcast, where we're exploring tools and perspectives that support educators and anyone who works with teams to create more conscious, supportive, and enriching learning environments. I'm your host, Amy Edelstein, and I'll be sharing transformative insights and easy-to-implement classroom supports that are all drawn from mindful awareness and systems thinking. The themes we'll discuss are designed to improve your own joy and fulfillment in your work and increase your impact on the world we share. Let's get on with this next episode. In this session, I want to focus on grief and loss. I want to focus on the experience of students and how to create a welcoming environment in the classroom, and how to allow, regardless of what subject you teach, how to allow the whole person experience to be there as it is. So many of our students may have lost a loved one, an immediate family member, a grandparent, aunt, uncle, neighbor, mentor, or they may have seen somebody close to them become very ill, and maybe they've not fully recovered, and there's fear around illness and the precariousness of life. And another aspect of grief and loss has to do with the terrible scourge of gun violence, because not only have we seen suffering from the pandemic over these last 15 months, 16 months, we have also seen just an unconscionable increase in gun violence, injury, and death. I teach and live in Philadelphia. I work with public school students in Philadelphia high schools. And in this city, last year was the greatest number of incidents of gun violence, injury, and death that the city has seen in 30 years. This year in 2021, there's a 40% increase over last year. So when I say that this is a scourge, that this is another pandemic, we are seeing it in our schools. Once a school loses one student to gun violence, the entire school community suffers. The entire school community feels the loss or feels the precariousness of life. This is something that, going into the factors, prevalence is beyond the scope of this conversation, but certainly there are conditions that are causing the increase of violence and the ease with which young people can obtain a weapon. So in the past, students would get mad at each other. They might punch each other. Somebody might get their arm broken or their nose broken. Those things heal. But when a firearm is involved, we're dealing with much more long-term consequences. And so grief and loss and the fear around the precariousness of life is something that our students are going to be carrying with them as they enter school in the fall. In order to make our classrooms and our schools the vibrant learning communities that we want them to be, in order to make them places where discovery, potential, self-actualization, exceeding one's expectations of oneself breaking limits, surpassing boundaries, is going to take being us as educators, being willing to be with things as they are, being able to see the reality as it is, and then build structures in our classroom to help support students. If we're not paying attention to the issues at hand that are affecting our students, if we're in denial, if we're following instructions from our district where the learning packets are coming out and it feels like business as usual and academic milestones and measures, which of course are important, but they have to be taken in context. They have to be taken in context of the reality of life on the ground, of life in these students' houses. And then we'll be able to provide robust solutions. We'll be able to provide love. We'll be able to provide well-being. We'll be able to provide structures that create stability when students are experiencing instability. So the first thing I'd like to say about grief and loss is that it may take time. We want to allow our students to go through a natural process where we're there and we're with them. We provide supports, we provide alternatives, we provide outlets, we provide guidance in the process of grief and suffering. And what we resist the temptation to do is we resist the temptation to try to hurry it along, to try to force students to come out of a process before their time. No one can judge or guide or put a label on the time it takes for one to grieve. It may be very intense, it may be very acute, it may vanish, it may reappear a year later or 5 years later. We want to create a culture in our classroom where we're not afraid of death, we're not afraid of illness, and we're not afraid to recognize the impact that violence can have in our neighborhood, and especially when we lose somebody close to us. If you're a teacher of mindfulness or you work with students in advisory, I really encourage you to take some time to allow students to honor someone they care about, whether it's somebody they lost or who was ill, or whether it's somebody they cherish. Creating that time to honor and appreciate them is so important, especially when as a nation we've seen the precarious nature of life and death. One of the ways to do that is to first create some markers in the classroom. Maybe there's a section of your wall or your bulletin board where you post poetry or song lyrics or images. You invite the students to add their own images or songs or poems. You switch them up to keep it fresh every month, every quarter. And if you have the opportunity to do activities in advisory, have the students create memory books where they create a book in honor of an individual or several individuals, And if it's somebody they've lost, that book is where they write their memories of them. When they feel sad, they use that book to add another memory of the person or a letter to that person. Keeping that individual who has passed alive in not just our hearts, but also in our conscious minds, in what we think about and what we share, it brings them into the present. It makes them here and now. So if a student is telling you about their aunt who died from coronavirus, you're creating a memory of that person in the present. You're listening to a story, an account of that person who's died in the present. You're creating a connection around them that didn't exist before. So they're living in the present. And so often students feel that if someone's passed, they can no longer speak about them, that they've almost been erased or vanished. And especially if it's a parent or a mentor. It's so very important to allow their memory to be a living blessing, allow their memory to come into their present tense. So you can make special time during advisory. And for those students who didn't suffer a loss, those memory books can be an acknowledgement for those people they care about. So they're really deepening their relationship and their connection, that sense of love, that sense of affinity. Writing stories, learning how to articulate and notice, be observant, be mindful of what it is about that person that makes them feel so special. So rather than just taking for granted, allowing that student to deepen their recognition, their awareness, their mindfulness of what creates that sense of presence, what creates that sense of connection, what it is they love about that person. When we feel solid in our appreciation of another, we carry them with us, we hold them in our hearts, so it feels less precarious. They feel more concrete. For students who are experiencing a lot of turmoil due to the pandemic, from both loss, illness, economic insecurity, the sense that life as we've known it could change so quickly, this way of enriching our felt experience through mindful awareness, through contemplative practice, through articulating, through noticing, through feeling, through embodying, internalizing, will help students feel a sense of strength as they deal with grief. It will help students who are not dealing with grief feel a sense of more stability and support. And it will make the classroom one that is more attentive, more appreciative, more touched by, more loving. Gun violence and the grief that it brings is even more complex. And students who suffered the loss of a classmate, a schoolmate, or a friend during the pandemic and were not able to grieve as a school together may feel the lack of resolution even more. And that might show up as a protective field around them where they become unreachable, numb, immune. And that's a type of grief to be very sensitive about, but to allow for expression. Remembering the student who passed, acknowledging their presence to a friend, reminding the friend of what was unusual about them, missing them, so that their presence is valued, that their life is valued, not just erased because the violence is so disturbing. When in doing love and kindness practice, you can invite students to do the love and kindness meditation towards someone they miss, or towards milestones that they missed, so that you're giving a formal space to allow them to acknowledge the love lost, the cherishing, the honoring. For what will be helpful to you as a teacher is to also be a little bit more aware, if possible, of which students have lost somebody to illness or to other circumstances during the year that we were not meeting in school personally. And to see if there are days, holidays that can be honored in the names of those who we want to remember. Being conscious as a classroom of suffering and sadness doesn't mean that the classroom devolves into that suffering and sadness. We want to allow children to be children and to enjoy and to learn and to do silly things and to laugh and to have fun and to support each other. We want to allow them to be carefree, even when they have cares on their shoulders. The mindfulness practices will really help. So doing more practice, but with incidences of gun violence that have affected this school, be very cognizant of eyes closed, not necessarily inviting eyes closed. You may have had a habit of dimming the lights. You'll have to ask for what the students want. If that makes them feel more comfortable or makes them feel more watchful. Keep your eyes peeled for signs of hypoarousal or hyperarousal. So if you do a practice and a student seems very lifeless, flat sheen on the face, dull eyes, even a loss of muscle tone, just that flatness, be sure to connect with them, see how they're doing. If you see signs of agitation, furtive eyes, shaking of the hands or the knees, that's also a sign that they may be triggered, or they may be experiencing grief, or they may be experiencing fear. At those times, you want to move a student out of the practice and find an activity that is easy for them to do. Drawing or listening to a song that is comforting for them, or writing in their memory book. seek the counselor, seek the mental health support team, and stay in close communication with them. This is going to take a 360 whole school community effort to move through. Some practices that I would encourage you to do with your students is first to create some shared agreements. And in those shared agreements for the year, how you're going to be as a school community, you can raise the question, what are ways that we can show our support if a student feels sad or has had an illness in the family or a death in the family? Find out from them what they want and actively refer to them those things. If the school community has experienced gun violence, allow the students to be in small group discussions with peers of their choice. It's important to allow them to choose who they want to discuss with and make sure that that's a compatible grouping, and say, what can we do as a school community to heal? What would you like to do? What would you like to talk about? What signs? Would you like a memorial? Would you like a memory wall? Would you like a spoken word event? Would you like to share solutions? Allow them to be solution makers of the situation. You can have a suggestion box, you can have a comment box, you can have a box on your desk where once every couple weeks at a random time, you say, you have two boxes, one for good or one for bad, or you have two colors of index cards, and you invite them to share one thing with you that is going well, that uplifts their spirits, that they're using for their own self-care and their own mental well-being, and one thing that's not going well. And keep it anonymous, but keep asking, keep inviting, keep the communication lines gentle but open. You can use the practices and adjust them to the situation. So let's do a love and kindness practice as we might in class where several students have experienced a recent death, a death over the past year. And come take your own meditation posture. Allow yourself to be still. Noticing your deep breath in, noticing your deep breath out. Taking some breaths in your own rhythm and time, and allowing the exhale to be long and full and relaxed. Just like the tide moves out, let the tide of breath flow out of you, and let the wave of fresh breath come into you. Let the tide of breath go out. Let the wave of rejuvenation come in. Now put your attention on your heart area and imagine that your heart has flowered in the most beautiful flower you can imagine. Picture the color. Picture the textures of the petals. Are they many and abundant? Are they few and graceful? Is it an orchid or a daisy? A sunflower or a dandelion? A tulip or a rose? Picture the type of flower, the richness of the color of the petals, the softness of the petals. And if your heart feels hurt or closed, imagine that the petals of that flower wrap around your heart like the softest blanket. Just resting. That beautiful color, that beautiful texture, that beautiful fragrance. And allow your heart to be held by that flower. Allow the petals of that flower to catch any tears from your heart. And keep allowing yourself to rest and be easy. Letting your heart be exactly as it is. Whether it feels open or closed, heavy or blank, light and loving, or hurt, or angry, or a mix of all those things. Just like the flower is open to the sky in every different kind of weather, storms and lightning, sun or clouds, night or day. That flower in your heart is open to the moods of your heart, whatever they may be. And in these last moments of this mindful awareness practice, let your whole body rest in the chair that you're on, feeling the support, feeling held. Feeling the strength of the chair. feeling its solidity. Take one last breath in and allowing the tide of your breath to go out. And then begin to put your attention on the objects in the room around you. Letting yourself come out of the focus of the practice and be ready to move on to the next part of your day. So I invite you to use that practice with your students. I invite you to allow them to have space to process on their own, but in community. So you don't need to process with them, but you're there and their fellow students, classmates form support. Thank you so much. Be well, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep allowing your heart to be with what is without any limitation on what's possible. Take care. Thank you for listening to The Conscious Classroom. I'm your host, Amy Edelstein. Please check out the show notes on innerstrengthfoundation.net for links and more information. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend and pass the love on. See you next time.